AI tokens got all kinds of attention early in 2024, but the interest has been waning and prices have fallen. But tokens aside, AI does have a lot of natural synergies with blockchain and crypto. So this is a conversation with David Minarsch. He's from Valor XYZ. That's the website, Valor XYZ. And we're going to talk about AI agents, and Olas network. Before we get started, please, if you would, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It always helps me out. And yeah, enjoy. Hopefully you learn quite a bit about AI agents, and where it's all heading along with the crypto space. There's no better person to shed some light on the crossover between AI and crypto than David Minarsch from Valory. Thanks so much for joining me here at Dead Cat Media.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward.
Usually what we do here is we have very short attention spans. I'll start the guest off with a couple of quick yes or no questions or one-word answer questions, and then we could elaborate on them as we go through our AI discussion, about Olas. So the first yes or no question that I've got here, and this is your opinion, is the average person right now capable of understanding how AI and machine learning works?
Probably not, but I think we all have a touch point to it.
Do you think AI will disrupt Web3 in the next 1 to 2 years the same way it is disrupting Web2 right now?
100%. I think AI is absolutely needed for Web3 actually to be successful.
And you think 1 to 2 years is a realistic time frame for this disruption?
We'll see a lot of change, and I think it'll be another decade for everything to fully play out.
I saw on the website something about AI agents. Mm-hmm. Are they at all similar to these various Telegram and trading bots that a lot of retail traders are using right now?
That's a great question. There's a big variance between the type of systems which people use, and some of them are better described as AI agents, some of them better as bots, and I'm happy to dive into the specifics.
Yeah, perfect. Because I'm just always looking for a place where someone can kind of attach themselves to a new concept. So maybe if people are out there are using these different bots, maybe you'll have a little bit better context than someone like me who had a hard time understanding AI agents the first time I looked into it. A question about Valory specifically. Has Valory already designed some AI-based products that are currently in use?
Yes, indeed, we have. Actually, the whole Olas network, to which Valory is a core contributor, has generated over 1 million transactions from autonomous AI agents. And the biggest use case is one where agents participate in prediction markets.
Okay. And I did see something about the prediction markets, and I'll be able to show this throughout the video. Tokens. Some tokens do exist related to AI. Mm-hmm. But do you think that we're a little bit too early for this to be investable via tokens, especially for retail investors?
I think what's important is that the token has a utility role, right, in the network. And that's certainly what's the case in Olas. And I've seen a couple of other examples where that's the case, but I think in a lot of cases, it's basically just a meme.
Right. Okay. So we saw a big interest in AI tokens, AI related to crypto, I would say in the beginning of this year. But just AI in general, more than just a buzzword, more than just a meme, what are some intelligent things that AI can actually do right now?
Right. Well, I think we have to distinguish between what happens in labs and research organization versus what users can actually access. And so obviously, I guess all of us here on this chat and also listening have used ChatGPT. And there you increasingly have this sort of agentic behavior of that product itself. So occasionally you might prompt it with something and then it'll go into like a loop to effectively do something on its own until it responds to you fully. So that's a form of AI agent. It's agentic. within like some bounds. And then you take the Olas agents I referred to earlier, the autonomous AI agents we have, which participate in prediction markets. They're another example.
All right, yeah. So I was going to ask, what models exist outside of ChatGTP that maybe end users will get some contact with
Right.
a couple of months. So you're saying that
So I think there's quite a
different
couple.
use case here. Yeah. Yeah. I would, if you can go into a couple of examples just for people that are.
So outside of like in the trad AI and the sort of outside Web3, you have, for instance, Character AI, which recently was sort of acquired by Google. They have these characters where basically you can chat with them. That's an interesting use case, I think, in the whole social space. We actually have a project which isn't too dissimilar, although with a different focus. In the Olas ecosystem, they're called creator bids. So you basically there have an autonomous AI agent that a single person or a group of people can own that acts as an influencer on like social platforms. And so, people can control it via like their like shares of in the token sense of this autonomous AI agent, and then this autonomous AI agent can sort of be a persona. So you have this both in Web2 and Web3. In Web3, you have an example of governance. That was actually one of the first application which we built called Governator as a demonstrator, but this is being like further refined, where actually there's two sort of applications here. One is where you delegate your token to an autonomous AI agent and it votes on your behalf, so you don't have to vote anymore. The other side is on the DAO side itself, where DAOs can use these systems to refine their governance processes, maybe like filter proposals, things like that. So that's an example. Gaming. So this whole idea of NPCs like non-playing characters. Then you have obviously DeFi, and I think that's where I see in Web3 actually the biggest opportunity for autonomous AI agents. Like we see that the UX is just very challenging. Not even if you have a beautiful, let's say, UI, there's still all this context overload people have to struggle with, and autonomous AI agents can sort of put that back in a box so that you're not exposed to all that complexity.
You brought up governance as well, and I remember reading a few months back. I can't remember which founder it was. I didn't know if it was the founder of MakerDAO or one of the well-known founders said that pretty soon the majority of participants in blockchain Web3 governance, DAO governance, will be AI. And I was thinking like, wow, that we must be really far away from that. Like, how many times will AI have to iterate before it can act on behalf of a person? I'm not sure. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that. Is it just like kind of an extension of the user if you're putting some inputs in, and then that AI agent is able to just act on the person's behalf based on their ideas? How would that look?
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier when the space is a bit narrower. All the autonomous AI agents which we see today are basically like specialists in the narrow domain, right? And so they're not like generalists. We don't have like that kind of technology yet. And so, as long as the design space is sufficiently constrained, you can have very useful applications today already. So with the Governator, for instance, like what happens is you delegate your tokens to it, and then it will sort of, for those tokens, vote on proposals. And currently, the preferences you can delegate to it, like, how it should vote, is pretty coarse. And you can obviously refine that. But I would caution to, see this too like binary. There's like, a lot of humans who will simply not engage with these processes if they're sufficiently complex, and having this kind of forms of abstraction can actually increase engagement, and then you can also iterate on these systems. So I think it's already happening. When we will reach this point where the majority, that we'll see.
Are there any standard metrics that are used to decide which AI models are effective and which are not, or do you just need competing models and then a certain amount of time to go by to see which ones are better at their specific function? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's one area where the AI space is very good at, to the degree that this actually is a whole sort of space where these things also get gamed. So basically what I'm alluding to are these sort of benchmarks which exist and are very relevant for, I guess, like public competition and like benchmark of these models. So you can go and, Hugging Face has most of them. You can go and find various benchmarks, which, some of them target sort of more like specific niches. Some of them try to be more generalist. And then you can see sort of how different models score there. So that's very helpful. And then a model. So, mostly people these days think of large language models, but a model by itself isn't an agent. So then you often have these sort of agent architectures built on top of models. And in the Olas ecosystem, that's obviously what we're doing. And one key thing which we also care about is benchmarking. So we also have a number of benchmarks that are also on Hugging Face, and it changes a lot which models perform well. So, as we go through, like the predict use case has been live for over a year. Through this time, the kind of models and agent strategies which work best have changed depending on the time. So there's a constant shifting tide.
Are there any serious limitations right now to using AI? Let's say in DeFi specifically.
Right.
What limitations do you see right now that need to be overcome?
Yeah, I mean, we're still early, and at every iteration of the technology, at the same time, you can do a lot of things. So what one has to understand today is that all these agents, no matter be it more in the Web2 space or Web3 space, they're always a mixture of rules-based and these learning-based or model systems, right? So you effectively can imagine it like in the trading agent. I can make this concrete from the prediction markets. That agent will never just sort of decide to suddenly do something else. So there's a set of rules which ensures that we'll engage with certain prediction market platforms and it will do certain like trading strategies on them. But then the models help it informing predictions about like the future. And similarly in the DeFi applications which we're creating, that's also the case. So there we basically have the trading agent like sort of be constrained to engage with certain platforms like protocols, like be it like Uniswap or Aave or some other kind of DeFi primitive, and it won't just suddenly decide to kind of use another DeFi primitive which hasn't been like whitelisted in a set of rules. But then within those, it will use AI models to like deal with signals and kind of refine its strategies and so on. So these are hybrid systems at the moment. And obviously what would be exciting is if there was less rules, because the moment you have less rules, you tend to have to write less code. But there's obviously naturally a trade-off between having like systems which are sort of more model-based, but then also harder to understand and control. So that's where we're at. But I would say in summary, you can build very exciting products already with the technical capabilities, and things are improving very fast.
David, you're here from Valory, and before we started recording, you said they're the core contributors for Olas, and we're going to talk about Olas, the network, the framework, and all that, the token. Why don't you just give a brief explanation of what you do specifically for Valory? I know you're the co-founder, but just so the audience can kind of get to know a little bit more about you before we get into the company and the project.
Yeah, I'm CEO and co-founder, and my job is basically to coordinate our team and our ecosystem to drive the Olas ecosystem forward. And Olas' mission is to ultimately give everyone an autonomous AI agent that does arbitrarily useful things. Today they do very specialized things. And so we work with like our partners and our team to build out use cases, most of them with a multi-agent nature. So what this means is the use case has like different types of agents interacting, and the Olas protocol plays a key role in facilitating that coordination.
I saw on the website when I was doing my preliminary research here, I saw AI agents, but then I saw autonomous agents. Are those the same, or does a distinction need to be made between the two?
Yeah, I think it depends always like on how people use these terms. But what I find is that we often append autonomous AI agent because a lot of people today use AI agent effectively as like sort of elaborate prompting strategies of a model. So often they're like more like workflows where you know maybe like call a model a couple of times in the loop, and then it yields control back to whoever called that model. Whereas an example of this would be ChatGPT. You as a user or other chat interfaces which generate sort of transactions maybe, where you as the user query the system with some prompt, and then it sort of maybe goes in a loop a bit, does something, comes back with the proposal to you for you to sign or the answer. In an autonomous AI agent of the sorts we are building, the focus is really that the user can have this seen more like as an extension of themselves that does things, valuable things for them when they're not around. So the user doesn't constantly interact with the system, and instead it's more like turn it on and have it do useful things while you do other useful things. So going back,
are we talking about like as it relates to crypto? Is this, like we said, voting on?
Quite literally, you can go on olas.network/operate. You can download an app called Pearl. Inside is this autonomous AI agent, and it will just work for you in those prediction markets with your funds, but you will not have to be there whilst it's doing so.
Got it. And then, so that was AI agents.
That was the sort of last part, was the autonomous AI agents versus the AI agents, which I would say are more sort of the interactive ones from my perspective.
Understood. Okay. So AI agents, users interact continuously to kind of prompt and elicit some information, whereas the autonomous ones, I think the way you said it was helpful, an extension of themselves, almost like a Web3 assistant where they don't have to be there. For example, you're working in your prediction markets. Is that close enough?
Exactly. And, I mean, obviously everyone might use these terms slightly differently, but that's how we tend to use them in the Olas ecosystem. Yeah.
Okay. What about these trading bots that are popping up in Telegrams, kind of trying to just make trading and any crypto transactions a lot easier for users? What are they lacking that doesn't qualify them as an AI agent or an autonomous AI agent?
Well, some of them might actually be. Depends on what they implement. I think there's a couple of things which are exciting about them, which is like the user experience is clearly like desired. I mean, quite a lot of people using them. And I think it's because of this ease of interacting. And it's also because they abstract a lot of the complexities, right? So they kind of one-stop shop. You kind of have this natural language interface, which people are naturally used to. I think one of the clear, like, more red flags about them is just the intransparency around them, right? So, like, if I'm a user, I'm sort of trusting some system where often it's like unclear who's actually behind them, and even if you might know who's behind them, the whole setup isn't like particularly ideal. You effectively have like some sort of centralized system somewhere in the background, which you're delegating effectively authority to. So what we're doing with Olas agents is effectively we give you, like, as I was saying, we have this app called Pearl, and Pearl lives on your desktop. And then when you're running this agent inside Pearl, like, you're running that code on your device. So you're like fully, in control of your wallet, effectively, your agent. You can think of it like a wallet, sitting there doing smart things on your behalf. And it can, do similar things, but it's sort of much more like sovereign. You retain your sovereignty of it. And I think that's particularly exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the trading bots I don't use because I don't want to put my wallet into something, especially a social media app, because a lot of these are in Telegram or Discord. but I could see the convenience factor, and people just want to kind of set it and forget it. And I totally understand that. But that, I mean, like you said, there's some centralized component that maybe a naive user doesn't even conceive. And
Yeah,
the way we described AI agents, autonomous agents, is kind of I don't want to say in a vacuum, but from the user's perspective or the whoever's prompting these things.
yeah.
Do they interact with each other as and almost perceive that there are other AI agents there?
You mean specifically in Olas?
Um, or in general, as this space kind of gets more complicated and more abstract as far
Right.
as them
Well,
either learning from each other or communicating.
it's a great question. I mean, effectively, one of the big promises of like autonomous AI agents is that they can be in this background, and that in fact, whatever you're consuming as an end user from your agent can actually be at the end of a long supply chain of other agents contributing inputs. So what do I mean by this? So one key hypothesis we have, and everything in all our ecosystems built around this notion, is that specialization will pertain even as these systems get better. So the reason being that we see this in human societies as well. Like we specialize, even though in general we're sort of generalists to start with, right? We can do a lot of things, maybe not all things individually. And we tend to specialize because it tends to have more, economic benefits from specialization rather than doing a lot of things. And so what you have is then humans trade with each other. We think the same thing will happen with autonomous AI agents. And we actually already see this in the use cases which we have live. So there's all this kind of specialization between agents. And so when you as the end user with your agent running, for instance, in Perl, using this agent and it, for instance, trades for you in prediction markets or manages your DeFi portfolio or participates for you in governance, it itself, that agent, will engage with other agents in order to get that done. So just this whole sort of interaction of agents happening in the background. And that's generally what we consider like a good thing because it allows for effectively also humans to participate in this more easily. So more as we have more, agents coming live, when they come live in Olas, people can run these different agents, right? They can take on the role of an operator of those agents, and they can actually, benefit from it economically, and they can also benefit from the transparency because they can get access to these systems, modify them, redeploy them in the way they want to, etc.
Is this going to facilitate onboarding of new users to Web3, or do you think this complicates things, at least in the beginning, before some of this can be either abstracted away or people can become more educated and used to the idea of kind of automating some of their actions without them actually being there?
Yeah, it's also a great question. I mean, basically, Olas is two things. It builds apps or has all these apps which people can use, built by the ecosystem builders, and it has this massively complex infrastructure layer. And so from the end user, any listener, I really recommend go to olas.network/operate because you can really learn about running an agent and you can see how simple this is. You download an app, you fund it. It's a bit like funding your wallet. And then your agent operates in these use cases. And currently, as I said, they're very specialized. They're very much in the background. Over time, you'll find that you can interact with them more. But in the background is this wildly complex system, which you as an end user don't need to know about, right? This is like what the builders are involved with. So I think there's this sort of separation of concerns where, yes, it's complex, but that sort of affects the builders and those building their use cases. We call them the launchers. And then like the end users who operate these agents, they can just focus on the benefit that agent gives them.
All right. So Olas it's not just a network and it's not a blockchain, right? It's a protocol that runs on Ethereum, EVMs, and Solana right now, right?
Yep.
So but it's also a framework.
Yeah.
So in the same way, maybe that someone who never built a website before because they never learned HTML, they could use this in a way that they could now use Squarespace. to build out a website. Is that an analogy that's helpful?
Yeah, I like that. I think currently what we call the builder, those building with the framework, still requires a bit more skill than Squarespace, but we're working on making it as simple. In fact, we launched a product earlier last month, which is sort of a going towards a no-code product to building agents, but this is like still in alpha. So yeah, the builder experience tries to get people to build agents quickly with the stack. Because as you can imagine, like we're talking about AI and we're talking about crypto. Both of them are complex topics. You bring them together. There's just a whole bunch of plumbing which needs to be done to even get started. And that stack sort of takes care of that, right? It gives you a lot of those primitives out of the box, and you can focus on the use case. But again, like all that complexity, like the end user doesn't obviously have to be exposed to, right? So that's often where I think people are overwhelmed, because the Olas network gives these different roles of people to contribute, like as a user or as like someone actually building these complex things. But if you're just a user, you can just go to operate an agent and benefit from that. But if you're like sort of excited about developing an agent, then yeah, you can do that with the stack.
So the goal is one day to have the framework no code, kind of like a Squarespace. But until then, just let the builders worry about that part of it. The users, they need to be a little bit knowledgeable, but you feel that you will be able to tap into a user base, even though we're kind of early in this AI crypto synergy.
Yeah, so right now the user is really the value proposition for the user. If you go to olas.network/operate and you run Perl, the value proposition is that your agent basically creates value for you in these prediction markets through two means, like staking and actually trading in these markets. So it's not like for you as a user, you don't really have to care about prediction markets. That's just what your agent happens to work in. Like you can see that's your employee basically. But as we're going to sort of more these applications which also have an interactive component, which have like a sort of ChatGPT component in it, obviously then users might want to sort of effectively prompt new functionalities for their agents or kind of evolve their agent. And so that's what we're currently starting to kind of offer on the builder side via this product called Propel Genie, which is basically just an agent where you can prompt another agent, but it's very, very early days still. So right now it's like focused on this technical audience rather than end users.
All right. So I saw something else when I was going through your documents about staking an agent. Do you mean staking tokens to an agent or something else?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So usually you would stake tokens, right? And then like sort of the question is like, well, it's that very sustainable for these kind of networks. Because you basically don't do anything other than staking these tokens. So we have this concept of proof of active agent, which is behind our idea of staking. So rather than proof of stake only, we have proof of active agent, which is a mixture of that and proof of work, proof of stake and proof of work. Now, what does it mean? So when you're running with Operate, with the Perl app, if you're running an agent and that participates in prediction markets, you have the option to stake some Olas tokens. And now your agent effectively is sort of going to work in these prediction markets. And when it has done its participation for the day, let's say, then it unlocks your staking rewards. So through showing activity in the use case, it basically unlocks the staking rewards for each pod. And that's what we call proof of active agent.
On the website, I go to the mission statement and it says to enable communities, organizations, and countries to co-own AI systems, right? This idea of co-ownership, why is this important? And then what's the alternative then? Like what's happening now versus this idea of co-owning systems?
Right. So what's happening now is very exciting. So we have like every other week, every week there's multiple announcements from the AI crowd, like, be it like OpenAI or Anthropic or you name it, releasing yet another more powerful model. And clearly all of them are sort of working towards some form of agentic systems, right? OpenAI has announced very clearly, others less clearly, but from their action you can tell. And so the question is like, where are we headed with this? So if these systems really become very capable, is it very desirable for me as a user to always rely on like 2 or 3 companies who can actually offer these systems? And so that's where this idea of like being able to co-own these AI systems comes from. And the idea here is like, rather than necessarily just going to like some centralized entity and rely on that, you could come together as a group and operate an autonomous AI system. And so naturally today, what you can co-own is less capable than what's available in a centralized context, right? But what we're effectively creating with this Olas network is effectively a network of these autonomous AI agents that create quite powerful use cases that are part of like a flywheel, which we hope to allow for more powerful open models and open agent architectures to emerge. And that's what sort of the long-term mission is, to offer everyone the ability to fully own their agent stack, be it as an individual or be it as a group. And because we think that these agents, as I mentioned, like really will become like key participants in global economies. And so if we, as individuals or groups, can sort of own this whole stack outright, it lets us participate more wholly than if we obviously have to pay a tax to 1 or 2 centralized companies.
The way you describe it, I immediately think just how basic and overly simplified on-chain governance is and how ineffective DAOs are. So it seems like this framework is going to be kind of like a better version of what we've seen in on-chain governance, in that these are models that can be updated as they're used versus requiring like very clunky systems that we have now, and they're not as reactive. Would you say that this is a more reactive way for people to be able to cooperate and also get things done?
Yeah, so I think actually initially we started with Valory and the Autonolas, now Olas network, when we were in 2021. And initially we were very focused on DAOs. So we built purpose-built solutions on that stack for DAOs. But why? Because we were saying, well, look, if you want to make a DAO actually autonomous, right? It's in the name. Well, you can't just have this on-chain part, which always waits for some transaction to arrive. You need the whole system, which an autonomous agent could offer. But the reality is, because they're so inefficient, it's a terrible customer. And so we basically at some point pivoted and decided, well, let's actually solve that problem for end users first. Like, let's build agents individuals can own first and create these multi-agent system use cases like Predict, and bootstrap ourselves into use cases where groups own agents. And, now we have some groups owning agents on Olas, but I would say in the overall grand scheme of things, just still the majority, it's like people outright owning their agents. The value proposition is similar, whether you're an individual or a group, right? You care about like owning your entire agent, and that offers this.
Right. Okay. No, I mean, it makes sense, because right now DAOs are not really DAOs. They're almost like a corporate structure with a multi-sig.
Yeah.
And they're a corporate structure. A lot of times they have nothing really to govern, right? There's no actual economic model or no assets or no crucial decisions. It's just a bunch of people that got together and formed a DAO because there's some DAO tooling out there. How do we go from that to like an actual economic model, or I would say an economy that these autonomous agents can do productive work around, whether it be governance, trading, maybe upkeep with code, things like that? And I'm guessing that because you have a token, there is some planned economic model that's going to be worked on.
Yeah. So actually, again, on the main side, Olas network, the main CTA on the top is like this button called Get Involved. And when you click this, you'll actually see there's 6 roles, and one of them is the governor. governors basically in Olas lock the Olas token for the vote escrow version, which is Olas, and that gives them governance rights. And effectively what they can govern today is a couple of things. So we are actually a fully decentralized DAO, so these token holders actually control all the protocol parameters, right? So there's no multisig which does that. There's also, which is the sort of, this kind of controlling the protocol parameters is sort of one of the core roles of the governor. The other big role is that they're controlling where effectively the Olas emissions go to. So in particular, where the emissions to the developers go to and where the emissions to these agent economies go to. And this works a bit like in Curve, the DeFi protocol where you have these gorges. We have like these staking economies. So effectively, the governors can direct emissions to different agent economies. And these agent economies themselves, as I said, kind of use each other. That's how they're designed. And so by that usage emerging, what we're seeing is now that like effectively the emissions drive effectively usage for the protocol itself. So that's still in the early days, but it's very exciting. And that's something we're leaning in heavily in the next months.
All right, before we get out of here, I just want to kind of wrap up and summarize how an individual can get involved and can begin, looking into having their own agent.
Yeah. Well, you go to olas.network and there's multiple ways to get involved. But I would say the most straightforward way is to basically and rewarding way is to run your own agent. And that basically means you go to the site, you click get involved, and you end up on the operator pane, you click operate. You can also go straight to olas.network/operate. There's an app called Pearl, which you can then download, and it runs on your desktop. It's a fully decentralized approach, and it allows you to run an agent that productively contributes to the Olas agent economies. And I think from there, then you can explore the other roles the ecosystem offers.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate this. This actually, I'm sure the audience agrees, definitely helped me learn a lot about AI agents, autonomous agents, and also where AI is going as it kind of intersects here with crypto, blockchain tokens, DAOs, even and stuff like predictions. So, thank you so much, man.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Every quantum leap, I'm finding myself trapped inside of people. Differences underneath the fundamental side of ego. Truly not that equal. That's why they say don't meet your heroes. We are part of this evil, so pardon all my amigos.